So this chapter is amazing. We're finally getting to see Izuku using all 7 of his quirks at once, and it does not disappoint. Like, this is one of the best chapters with one of the best sequences in the entire series. And it's picking up with us seeing Izuku just destroying Shigaraki, like coming off at the end of the previous chapter, where he just is smashing him into the ground here. But we're getting more insight into his final quirk here, which is the second user's quirk, and it was revealed in the previous chapter that it's called Gear Shift. And we knew that he could alter the speed of things that he touched, but it's actually more nuanced than that. Because it had become so strong by being amplified by One For All over the years, he can now alter the speed of each and every cell in his body. So that means, like, when he touches himself and activates the quirk to alter his speed, it's not like he's just overall just altering his body. He's individually targeting every single cell. So the speed of every single cell in his body is being altered. And he's become so unbelievably powerful and fast with this that going further, it says when the raw stored up power of One For All, like the stockpiler aspect of it, overlaps with Gear Shift, the smash that he delivers packs enough power to bend even the laws of physics. And then we see him hit All For One with a Quintuple Smash, meaning that he's hitting him so incredibly fast that it appears that he has hit him with 5 consecutive smashes all at once. Like, I picture this happening in a similar way that we see Boros hitting Saitama at the end of season 1 of One Punch Man. And this isn't even the peak of Izuku bending the laws of physics here, because after he quintuple smashes Shigaraki here, he immediately follows up and charges at him again. And All For One's like, even if my eyes can't keep up, I can predict his next attack based on the angle and the timing of the previous one. So Izuku's moving so fast here that All For One can't even keep up with him anymore. But he can kind of predict where he's going. So we see him just like blindly counter where he assumes that Izuku's going to be, but he's not there because Izuku just stops midair. And we see him activate low gear this time. And the second user says this quirk, Gear Shift, can change your speed while ignoring inertia. So that's just like blowing my mind here, because, you know, something in motion has to kind of just slow down to come to a stop, right? It can't just instantly stop like that. Well, in this case, Izuku can, because we saw him use Gear Shift to increase his speed before, you know, like second gear, third gear, and etc. But he can also go into low gear where he just stops moving completely. No slowdown, just instantly stopping, ignoring inertia, which goes back to him bending the laws of physics here. And then All For One tries to hit him again, but then suddenly like a smoke screen appears. And this sends us into the best sequence of this chapter and one of the best sequences in the series. And it's because in this sequence, Izuku is going to use all of his quirks all at once, all synergistically working together, and it's just incredible. So first we saw him activate the smoke screen, which is the 6 user's quirk. This is shielding himself from All For One's visibility, of course, but also at the same time he can't see All For One because he's in the smoke screen. However, that doesn't really matter because he goes on to use the 4th user's danger sense quirk, so he can pinpoint the exact location of All For One through the smoke screen despite not seeing it. Then using the 7th user, Nana's quirk, Float, he flies up in the air to get the high ground above him. Then he uses the 5th user's quirk, Black Whip, and grabs him, pulls him up into the air with him. And then we see that he has stored up power from using that quintuple smash on him earlier, and now he has enough kinetic energy to go into the next sequence. And this is of course the 3rd user's Fajin quirk. And then finally he activates Gear Shift again and just immediately goes into like its final phase, which is overdrive. And then we just see him launching at All For One here with all of the vestiges behind him, and just this incredible panel, just an incredible sequence. Like I said, finally using all 7 of his quirks at once here, all synergistically working together, and it's just amazing. And Izuku's also like, this time I'm not holding anything back. And we see him almost go into that like full-blown rage mode, but then he's able to control himself and his pupils come back. This goes back to a couple chapters ago when he saw Bakugo nearly dead and he almost completely lost control of himself, but then he remembered what the 5th user and All Might were telling him about how, you know, you need to control your emotions. It's okay to use your rage and anger because that can amplify One For All, but you need to be able to control it, because if you lose yourself, then it's a detriment. And we see him like controlling his rage here, which is just bringing him to like the full apex of his power, at least for now. I assume he'll get stronger than this towards the very end of the series. And he winds up just hitting All For One so incredibly hard that like he's cracking his stomach and just blowing all of these pieces off of him. Like he's hit him so hard here that he's pretty much down for the count right now. And afterwards, the second user is like, this is where the going gets tough, kid. Remember what Shimura said. Don't go collapsing on me now. So I think this is foreshadowing for sure. And it goes back to what the second user also said in the previous chapter, where he was like, we only have 5 minutes to defeat Shigaraki, or else the world is doomed, essentially. And I guess that means that once he activates Gear Shift and, you know, starts altering the speed of his cells in his body, he only has about 5 minutes to do this because it's so exhausting on him that he's eventually going to pass out. The second user also alluded to this a while ago when we first got a hint of his quirk, when he said, I thought I told you that it was meant to be your last resort. So yeah, I think we are going to get to that point, and Izuku is going to pass out eventually from using this, but he's not going to be able to defeat All For One in time. And another thing that makes me think that is what's said by All For One in this next sequence here, where as he's falling, he says, I haven't even used a single quirk yet. I haven't been able to show the true power of this body. It's their fault, that wretched Eraserhead and those brats. And I've also been confined in this coffin. And that's very true. Like as soon as this battle started, they were like immediately erasing his quirks, and we haven't seen anything from him yet, only just him using his modified quirk singularity body. So I'm assuming that Izuku is going to get to that breaking point. He is going to pass out, and then something's going to happen as to where All For One can finally use all of his quirks and everything, and we see his true power. And I'll get into what I think that is, because afterwards we see like these 9 lights appear behind All For One as he starts freaking out after he said that. And I'm not really sure what these lights are. They do look similar to what like the One For All lights are when we saw them like tapping into the Vestige's power before, but I don't think that's necessarily what it's paralleling to. Maybe I think this more so represents the allies that he has left, maybe, because afterwards he says, Yoichi, if everything I've done until now decides whether I win or lose, not yet, then I've still got a chance. And then we see Spinner, and the narration says it's all been left to Spinner. So this is like really interesting, because I think this is giving us insight into what is going to happen possibly, which is going to lead to All For One potentially turning the tables here, because the last time we saw Spinner was in chapter 353, and he's all big and giant like this now because All For One had given him like this giant quirk on top of the quirk that he already had, the Gecko quirk, before the war had started. And we saw that Spinner was like with the heteromorphic army that he's like controlling right now in his portion of the war, and he was taking on like Shoji and the other heroes with him. And Spinner said, they locked up Kurogiri, but we're taking him back in order to destroy the status quo, for Shigaraki's sake, for our sake, to demolish the system that oppressed us. So I think all of this means that maybe Spinner and his group is actually going to like get Kurogiri back. Like they're going to break him out from where he is, and then they're going to use his quirk to like warp to UA, like inside of the coffin where they are right now. And then I guess he's either going to bring everyone with him and take out Aizawa and Monoma that way, or they're just going to warp All For One out of there. And then once he's outside of that, he won't be erased anymore, and then he can just fully use his quirks, and then it's just, you know, pretty much chaos at that point. So I assume that this is probably where things are headed at this point. But let me know what you think is going to happen, and what do you think about Izuku possibly passing out here eventually? Let me know. And if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.